Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Engineering Masterclass Fireside Chat. Especially in the engineering and tech world, we so very often focus on IQ and expertise when it comes to hiring people and retaining people. But what would probably surprise you is that 90% of the success at workplace comes from emotional intelligence. So, what is emotional intelligence? And how can you start to get smart about your emotions? There's probably no one more qualified to talk about EI than Dr. Relly Nadler, who is a well known psychologist and a master certified coach. And Relly has been training the CEOs of some of the biggest companies in the world on how to master their emotions for the past 20 years. So, Relly, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Akshay. I appreciate that.
So let's jump right into it. So Relly, tell us, what is emotional intelligence and why is it so important for us to work on it?
Well, I'll give you the simple definition that you mentioned. It's being smart about your emotions. That comes from an organization called 6 Seconds. Has been doing it for a while. That's the simple one. But the one that when I first heard about it and it resonated is understanding yourself and managing yourself. So there's a self side, understanding others and managing others. So when I first heard that, they call that, it had face validity. It's like, that resonates, that makes sense. So that's the simple definition. Understanding yourself, knowing about your strengths and weaknesses, how do you manage yourself? There's competencies about how do you manage yourself. And then what do you know about others? That's where empathy comes in, the kind of sense of the organization. And then how do you manage others? Leadership, team building, developing others, all those. So there's competencies that fit in those.
Specifically, how can emotional intelligence help leaders get better? Whether it's about enhancing their decision making, getting buy-in from different stakeholders, or even building healthier relationships.
Well, I think all those things you just mentioned, how it can help. We think that just because we think something, that's a key aspect, which it is, but your thinking is highly influenced by your emotions. And these days, where there's so much going on, our emotions are heightened. And why emotional intelligence is important, we would typically start with self-awareness. What do you know about yourself? And then how do you manage yourself? With the anxiety, the uncertainty we have with the pandemic, and do you get to someone have COVID-19, or who's going to get it in your family? What do you need to do as far as the vaccine? Where are you? I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty. The more you can manage your emotions, you will be clearer in your thinking. And the emotional piece and our thinking are all together. Often we are leaning on the thinking and maybe missing some valuable input. So maybe you want to think about the input. The emotional aspect is just input, especially for the engineers you're having. You get a lot of input, but are you getting enough of the input about how you think and how you make decisions? And you mentioned some of the dependent results. People are more productive, performance goes up, relationships are better, retention in organizations is better. People are more engaged. So for all those reasons, it's important.
Really, what about teams? What are the ramifications if you don't emotionally well manage your teams? And could you share some tips with us on how we could improve that EI at a team level?
We're complex. You put then all these complex people, you just imagine what's going on with your head. So one of the analogies I would use, especially around teams, it's this idea of herding cats. Well, with teams, you're herding brains. The brains are going all over the place, and they're reading into what you say. They're reading into what you don't say. So with a team, for the leader, getting everybody on the same page. How do we align all the thinking versus going all over? And it's a different set of skills for a leader. So one, the leader has to ask the team for what do you think? And when just this idea we get from Gallup around engagement, Gallup has a big management side. When you ask someone for their opinion, they feel more valued. When you ask your team for their opinion, you're going to get better ideas than just the one individual idea. So a couple of tips would be in the first 2 or 3 minutes of the meeting, if you are leading that meeting, can you say the purpose of the meeting is? If you don't say that, they're all over and they're still thinking about what was the last meeting. And so what's the purpose of the meeting and what kind of input do you want from them? So you have, let's say you have 3 or 4 agenda items. In aligning the brains, you may say agenda item number 1 is just for your information. Agenda item number 2 is something I'm basically want us to do. Agenda item number 3, I would like your input. If you don't say that, your team thinks you want your input on everything. So kind of being distinct about each item, what result do you want? You may not want everybody's input on everything. You may want to say, here's what we're doing. That sense of clarity is important for the leader to bring to the organization.
But really, I think we all find ourselves in situations where our emotions completely take control of ourselves, right? And they make us look really stupid. So what are some of the major derailers that we all face?
Let me just define derail. Sometimes a nice word is called fatal flaws. There's a couple of researchers who coined that term. But so I have in my book and on my website a thing called a derailer detector. And it really is a combination of things that get you off the rail or track. Some of them are, the most common one is lack of impulse control. 10 seconds, lack of impulse control reverberates around the individual. And sometimes those 10 seconds can be such a detriment to who they are. So lack of impulse control drives others too hard. That can be a derailer. Smartest person in the room is another big one. Not coming up with your own ideas and kind of being too dependent on others. Inability to work well on a team. You can see how all these kind of blend. And so for the team, you want the team IQ to be as high as each of the individuals. If it's not well led, the team IQ goes down. And you have people at 115, 120, 125 IQ, smart people, they get together, it's hovering around average. Agendas, people aren't listening, people cut each other off, interruption. Someone gets interrupted, they don't share anymore. I mean, those are all those dynamics that happen.
I've heard you talk about the amygdala hijack as well. So what kind of a hijack is this, and how does it affect our brains and our decision-making ability?
Yeah. It's a primitive part of the brain, and the brain has these different networks, and this is part of the emotional network. The amygdala is in the back here, and the 2 almond-shaped pieces, and it has what's called privileged position, that if you see something that's frightening, it really is, it's always kind of going out, and is the world safe? And if not, it can take over. So there's the 4 F's that get activated by the amygdala hijack. Fight, flight, we know about that, freeze, and faint. And so it takes over, and so you can see me now, so it's almost like it shuts down the prefrontal cortex temporarily. And it's like a gate goes down and nothing is getting in there because the blood and oxygen are in there. And so another way of saying that, we temporarily lose our IQ points. Nobody I deal with wants to hear that. And if you can calm yourself down and the self-awareness, self-control, ask some good questions, it can kind of bring back your IQ points.
So really, could you teach us very quickly how to do an emotional audit of ourselves?
Yeah. We've all heard from somebody, maybe it's your grandmother, you're upset and they say, oh, just count to 10 and take some deep breaths. So that works from the deep breaths, the sympathetic, parasympathetic relaxes you. But what if you had 5 strategic questions that got blood and oxygen? They're thinking questions here because the blood and oxygen's there. So when you're counting to 10, taking a deep breath, you could say, what am I thinking? You'd wait and see what comes up 2-3 seconds later. I'm thinking, why'd they do that? What's wrong with them? All right. What am I feeling? Irritated. I'm upset. Okay. And each one of these you're accepting. What do I want now is a directive question. Well, I want to work this out. I want them to not make mistakes. Okay, good. And you can see your IQ points coming up because now you're actually thinking. And is there any way I'm getting in my way now? That one is critical because, I'm not listening. My voice is raised. If you don't know that, and this is where self-awareness is there any way I'm getting in my way now? And that's usually a pattern that you'd have. What am I thinking? What am I feeling is a pattern. What do I want will be different in every situation. How am I getting in my way? You need to know that before you continue. The last one is the corrective action. Now that you have all this data and information, especially for engineering folks, these are all great information. What do I need to do differently now to be my best? And often I would say, actually, that the brain, it's like a Google search. If you're not asking the right questions, what do I need to do now to be my best? And the brain goes, I don't know. Let's see. Let's go back to our files. And what will come up is a better answer, because often we give bad questions. Why can't I seem to ever get this? Your brain's like, oh, I'll tell you. You failed math, when you were a sophomore. So you want to ask really good questions. The emotional audit are really good questions for your brain.
An interesting technique that you talk about in your books as well as your blogs is the mastering the moment technique. So what technique is this, and when should we use it?
So the mastering moment is it's putting emphasis that your success happens in the moment. So to master the moment, you have to know input and output. So we're good at output, but are you getting the right input in the moment to get the right output? So on the input side is awareness. What's going on for me? So the emotional audit is one. What do I want to see happen? What's my goals? How do I speak clearly? And then what's going on with others as input? They're not listening, or they're not looking at me, or I can see they're upset about that. It's like, oh, okay, I need all this input about myself and about them so that my communication, my decisions, my judgment are the best in the moment. So it really kind of capsulizes, we kind of call that emotional brilliance, which is in the moment, how can I be my best? What do I summon? What do I beckon? What are my strengths? How do I bring in the moment the just right reaction? And I'll give you one analogy. It's like every moment, every situation is differently, but if you're going to do a talk in front of a group, it's like going to your closet and you have all your clothes, all your strengths, your competencies, and which one do you pick just for that moment? Like I said, okay, I'm going to wear this shirt today because I like it. The dark works well. Do you know what to pick and choose to be your best in the moment? That's emotional brilliance, which is kind of a subset of emotional intelligence.
So really, could you tell us a little bit more about your book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence? And, also to our viewers, where could they go if they need more information on EI?
Things. One is my website, which is www.drrelynadler.com, DR for doctor, drrelynadler.com. There is a couple assessments on there that they can do, the EI Star Profile, the Rattler. They can also link into some of the podcasts that I do with my co-host, Dr. Kathy Greenberg. So that's one place. My book, Leading with Emotional Intelligence, you can get on Amazon. And then Dr. Kathy Greenberg and I have recently a book called Emotional Brilliance. I was highlighting some of that. And we also have a platform that people can go and get a variety of e-learning tools. And that's www.eblifebook.com. EB for Emotional Brilliance Life Book, eblifebook.com. And there is a series of e-learning tools, modules, and stuff on there also. So my site, and then eblifebook.com.
Thank you so much, Relly. I think that this has been really inspiring, and I'm sure it will inspire a lot of people to get onto that path of mastering their emotions. So thank you so much for speaking with us.
You're welcome. This was fun.